Welcome to Issues of Contemporary Politics with Dr. Brovkin. One of my listeners asked me in a commentary to talk about the relationship between Ukraine and the European Union. Now, exactly today, there's a special meeting of the leaders of European Union to discuss very important two topics: rearmament of the European Union and military assistance to Ukraine. So my thesis is, up front, is that both of these measures will only prolong the war and in the long run actually hurt Ukraine more than help. One could even make it even stronger. The decision of the European Union to provide aid to Ukraine will lead to its destruction, and I will try to explain why. But first, the facts. The facts we all know are that in the last few days, Prime Minister Starmer talked about boots in the ground and airplanes in the air after the peace treaty or ceasefire with Russia is achieved to preserve Western presence in Ukraine. So that's one thing. Another, a very important step was taken yesterday on the 4th of March by President Macron, who addressed the nation, and he spoke about the danger from the east. And the logic is very simple. Europe has to arm because of Russian danger. So specifically, Russia was named as an adversary, and the logic is that, well, Russia attacked Ukraine, and France is next, just like that. So that's the kind of logic. You could never leave the aggressor unpunished, because then the new aggression will come. Well, the only thing one could respond to Mr. Macron in this situation is that right now, there are no Russian troops in Ukraine, according to the Russians. The fighting is going on the territory of Donbass, and this territory split away from Ukraine in 2014. And for 8 years, President Putin tried to negotiate a autonomy settlement for these territories so that they could remain in Ukraine and yet be open border with Russia. And of course, when it all failed, then the Russians provided military assistance to Donbass, and the fighting has been going on for 3 years. So it's not exactly an attack on Ukraine, but it's help to the provinces seeking to separate from Ukraine. Be it as it may, let's move on to the most important segment in this discussion, and that is what exactly the European Union decided to do. Is it feasible, and what will be the consequences? So what it decided to do, von der Leyen made it yesterday quite clear. They want to raise 800 billion euros for rearmament. And the way to do it is very easy, a very interesting method, and that is to ease the ceiling of debt. In other words, you're going to have rearmament by debt, by having more debt. And then it would be centralized procurement. There will be investment in arms industry. There will be production of tanks and carriers for infantry and shells and all kinds of other equipment. And in the end, there's a sort of a talk about building the European army. And all of that, a part of it, which is 150 billion of that, would be assistance to Ukraine. And again, it's not specified whether this assistance is going to be in the form of a grant or whether it's going to be like what Starmer has done, £2 billion as a loan. And if it is a loan, what is it going to be secured by, and how Ukraine will be able to pay, etc., etc. But whatever the problem of the specifics are, my question here is, will it work? Is it feasible to do what she has just announced? And also, what the effect will be on the war in Ukraine. Now, the first question, whether this is possible. And that invites me to give you some data on the debt of the European countries. raising the ceiling means you could borrow more. And then, of course, you have to pay interest on these debts. And so here is the data. The United Kingdom debt is 2.8 trillion British pounds, which is 100% of its GDP. Germany is the best situation. It is 2.6 trillion euros, and it is 64% of its GDP. France has 3.3 trillion euros, and it's 113% of its GDP. Italy has 3 trillion euros in debt, 107% GDP. In other words, European countries are totally and completely indebted. They have been living with budget deficits for decades. And for decades, they haven't had a balanced budget. So to raise the limit means only one thing. They'll have to pay more interest on their debt. And moreover, even if they decided to do this, this is not for the European Union Commission or Parliament to decide, because national parliaments are still in charge of their budgets. And that means that the parliaments of each of those countries will have to decide, will have to pass. And there's no guarantee that this will happen. In fact, a funny thing happened just yesterday when the Chancellor-to-be, has not yet a Chancellor, Merz, decided to vote on the raising of the budget deficit and the debt ceiling by the old parliament, even though there are elections and they have taken place and he's going to be the next chancellor, but there will be a strong opposition in parliament to any of these things that he's going to do. So the smart, new, creative chancellor to be decided that the old parliament is going to vote for it so that it can pass, fearing opposition. Now, in France, of course, President Macron can speak whatever he wants, and that he has no majority in the Assemblée Nationale. And his governments are changing one by one, and the one that is now is only there because the socialists refused to voted out of office because they voted the preceding one, and some kind of strike deal was struck, and they continue to support it. And he has only 1 year and a half left. So this big question whether Macron's pretension to be the leader of the European army and to increase military budget would actually fly with the Assemblée Nationale. Now, the interesting thing, of course, is the von der Leyen and the European Commission is doing all this, and they're doing it for themselves. I think this is the most important motivation, is that then they're going to be in charge of deciding what kind of procurement is going to happen and what companies would be ordered to do this and what to do that. And I think it's irresoluble. Who is going to make a preference whether the German tanks or the French tanks would become, European army, or the stockpiles of weaponry, whether it would be the Swedish weapons, missiles, or is it going to be the Anglo-French ones? In other words, there are all kinds of problems with procurement and centralization in this diverse community that is EU. But all these problems aside, the most important, of course, problem is the problem we have to find an answer to is, will it work? Will they be able to create these kinds of armament industry and face Ukraine and Russia with this kind of independent military force? I sincerely doubt it, for two reasons that I've just identified. Number one, it is the indebtedness, which is growing, and number two is that the national parliaments probably will not jump to vote new billions in countries that are really not seriously threatened by Russia, and they know it very well. Because just a few months ago, they've been saying Ukraine will win. Now, you can't have it both ways. Either you believe that Ukraine will win, and then there's no danger to you, to the European Union, or you believe Ukraine will not win, and then there is a danger, but only if you follow the logic of a domino, where one thing falls after another. But if you have any serious understanding of history, you understand that it's one thing for Russia to attack Ukraine, because Ukraine was a part of Russia for 400 years, and it's quite another to attack France or Germany or Spain or whatever. So this is the logic. Now, the second question, of course, is can they do it? Suppose that they put in all these billions and they do start this common procurement, and they will actually put in some money into some arms production. Here are the military questions. Can the Europeans provide satellite intelligence and targeting? No. The answer is no. They don't have it, and it will take years to create this. The only ones who have it are the Americans and the Russians. Okay. Can the Europeans provide air superiority over Russia or over Ukraine? The answer is no, they cannot. Russian Air Force is by far superior. Not even to speak about Russian missiles and Oreshnik and both nuclear and non-nuclear that are by far superior by 10 times, I don't know, 100 times. There's no comparison between European Union and Russia. Now, can they provide ground troops? Well, the way it is now, no. British army is like maybe 50,000, or the French army on paper is 200,000, but in fact closer to 100,000. The German army in a similar situation. So they have no troops, they have no ammunition, they have no shells. Their production of shells, all of European Union and all of NATO, is inferior to Russia. In other words, from the purely military point of view, what they're trying to do is impossible in the foreseeable future, which is several years. So the question is, why do you claim to provide military assistance when in fact you can't do it? It just doesn't make any sense. Only if what you realize that you can't do it, but you want to do it to make some money and to create this sort of agiotage, this sort of expectation that something is going to happen, and in fact you realize, if you have a rational mind, that that cannot be done. However, there is a political consequence to this stance. This stance is obviously against that of Donald Trump. Donald Trump wants to make a deal. He wants to create some kind of a compromise, and the Europeans say, no, we're going to go our way. We're going to support Ukraine in its war. In other words, to put it bluntly, Trump is for peace. European Union, led by von der Leyen, is for war. Okay, fine. Now, let's do some strategic theory by German philosopher Clausewitz. He basically said that the war ends when the cost of continuing the war is more expensive than it's worth, what you're going to gain from it. And I think the United States under Trump has come to that conclusion, that spending another $300 billion so that Zelensky or whoever follows him is going to have Donbass, it's just not worth it. It's just not worth the effort and the money that it takes. He has other priorities, which is rebuilding American industry, bringing it back to the United States, competing with China, competing with the European Union, etc. Now, now the most important part. What happened today in Brussels and the announcements of President Macron and Prime Minister Starmer basically give a very powerful argument to Putin in his negotiations with Trump. Putin could say, okay, you and I can make a deal, fine, and we can agree on a compromise. And let's say the compromise is 4 provinces and no NATO and all the things we talked about before. But now we have a new situation, and a new situation that Europe is going to rearm against us. They are going to build all these promised thousands of tanks and missiles and air defenses and this and that. So we feel threatened. Now, in political science, this is called the spiral of escalation. So he could say, no, 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 no. We cannot agree with you. I'm sorry to say, but in 4 years you will not be a president anymore, and we have to think of the future. We cannot leave Ukraine in this condition where the Europeans are going to continue to arm it. In other words, the point is the decision that the Europeans made to ostensibly help Ukraine, in fact, would lead to the conclusion on the Russian side that the best guarantee for their security is not any kind of deal with anybody, but the control over Kiev and the end and the capitulation of that regime. That seems a kind of a queer logic. Europeans want to help Ukraine. In fact, they're ruining it by their position. And that's my main argument. Thank you very much. I enjoy your comments. Please write. I answer to most of them, if not all. And don't forget to subscribe and also read my more historical approach to these matters of Russian foreign policy in my latest book, From Vladimir Lenin to Vladimir Putin. Thank you. Bye-bye.